The Indiana County Republican Committee is proud to be a presenting sponsor of today's debate, and we thank Renda Broadcasting for hosting it, as we have always supported getting factual information out to our community. Our committee would like to thank each of you for listening in, as it is very important for votes to be made with knowledge and confidence. Let's work together and keep Indiana, Pennsylvania, and America great by voting all Republican on November 3rd.
Hi, I'm Dennis Semsick, candidate for the House of Representatives.
And I'm Tony DiDoretto, candidate for state senator.
We encourage everyone to make their voices heard through their vote.
We favor investments in education and limiting the taxpayers' burden from the inequities of charter and cyber schools. I'm Tony DiDoretto.
I'm Dennis Semsick.
And we both ask for
your vote on November 3rd.
Debates, the Pennsylvania House 62nd District. I'm Todd Marino. I'll be moderating the debate today. Our guests are the candidates for the House 62nd District, Dennis Semsick and Jim Struzzi. In the studios with us live, you can watch us here on WCCS on our Facebook page, and you can also, of course, tune us in at 101.1 FM and AM 1160. Our debate brought to you by the Indiana County Republican Party and the Indiana County Democratic Party. Our candidates are ready to go this morning, and so we'll begin with the same format we used for our Senate debate last week. Each of the candidates will have 2 minutes for an opening statement, and then we'll get into our questions. Each of our candidates then at the end of the debate will have 2 minutes for their closing statements as we begin our debate this morning. The question format is this way. Each candidate will be given a question, and the first respondent will have 2 minutes to respond to that question. The other candidate will have 1 minute in response if he would like to rebut or respond to that same question. And then the first candidate will have the last minute on that question, and then we'll reverse the order candidate to candidate for the second question, and so on through the course of the debate. So let's say good morning to our two candidates. To my right is Dennis Semsick. Good morning, Denny. It's good to have you with us here today. I don't know that microphone was working there. Jim, let's say good morning to you.
Good morning, Todd.
All right, Jim is here. Let's see.
There, it's on now.
There you go. There you go. Now we're set to go with Denny and with Jim here this morning. All right, so let's get to our questions and our answers, but first let's have our opening statements this morning. And Denny, you have drawn the first statement, and so you will have 2 minutes, and you may begin.
Well, I'd like to thank Render Broadcasting and you, Todd, for providing this debate for us today. I'd like to thank my opponent for his commitment and his service for the last 2 years. And I want to invite all the listeners and thank you for joining us today, and I hope you find this enlightening. I'm a lifelong resident of Indiana County. I live in Pine Township with my wife, Cheryl. We have 4 kids, 6 grandchildren. I worked for PennDOT for 35 years. We've had a lot of tremendous success there, and we accomplished a lot of multi-million-dollar projects. I'm going to just mention a few of them. The Route 422 bypass from the Bridge of Nowhere over 119 to Penn Run. The 119 South project from Homer City south to Route 22. That provided the first 4-lane, well, our only 4-lane access to the county seat. We originated the design and built Rose Street extension around IUP and all the rails to trails projects you see in Indiana County. In fact, District 10 has the distinction of letting the first federally funded rails to trails project, which is the Ghost Town Trail. Through my career, I relied heavily on my personality and my sense of humor, even in stressful situations, to calm people and comfort them. And I found that over my career, that is what led me to building consensus and achieving success. Now, I came out of my retirement because I'm tired of hearing broken promises by our representative and his pandering of special interest at the expense of our citizens. I believe I'm a better candidate because I'm authentic. What you see, this is me. I'm honest, I'm a man of my word. I'm committed to helping the people of the 62nd District. The difference between me and my opponent could not be more dramatic. He supports big business. I support you, the people. My goal was to put...
The time is up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The 2 minutes is up.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
All right. We'll have a chance in your closing statement again. Now, Jim Struzzi, it is your chance for your opening statement this morning.
All right. Thank you, Todd, and thank you to Renda Broadcasting for hosting this debate, and to all your listeners for their continued support. I'll get into some of the comments that my opponent just made. Truthfully, I don't understand the attack when we used to work together at PennDOT, and I called this man a friend at one time. But I'll continue with my opening remarks because I do take that personally. I graduated from the University of Pittsburgh with a degree in English writing and communications. I attended graduate level classes here at IUP. I penned 2 children's novels. I was a journalist. I also worked for PennDOT, as I mentioned, for 14 years as a community relations coordinator here in Indiana, Pennsylvania, in District 10, and also in Pittsburgh in District 11. So I understand the Western Pennsylvania region very well. After that, as many know, I became the Chamber of Commerce president here in Indiana County, working very hard to grow Indiana County, and I am here by choice. I moved here to raise my family, and more importantly, I am a father. I am a husband. I ran for office to make a difference for our communities, to make a difference for my family and your family. I promise to work hard on the issues that face Indiana County, to grow jobs, to build our economy, to make our community safe, to build a future for our families. And I have kept that promise. I have worked hard. My staff and I have helped more than 4,000 constituents in these past 2 years. We've battled through this pandemic to make sure that people had unemployment compensation, to get businesses reopened. We have kept our promises. While we have won many battles, there are many more to win. I have worked with my colleagues across the aisle in Harrisburg to co-sponsor legislation all over Pennsylvania, both Democratic and Republican. While we have won many battles, as I said, there are many more to fight. I hope that I have earned your vote for re-election. And I do take this personally because I care deeply about our communities and about our families and about our future. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. And we'll move on to the question section of our debate this morning. We are going to switch out your mic cord, Jim. There was a lot of snow on the microphone there that we would just as soon not have. Last week in our Senate debate, we started talking with the pandemic. Today we're going to start with education as our prime topic, or our first topic. And Denny, you will have the first question in this particular segment of our debate this morning. And the question is, IUP is struggling desperately to regain its financial footing. What needs to be done to stabilize this institution that is so vital to Indiana County's economy? You'll have 2 minutes.
Okay, I'm here to speak the truth and the facts. And if they're negative, that's not my fault. I'm sorry for that. But even the issue with IUP, that was generated by our state legislature. Since the time the state system was started, they've cut their support for IUP to the point right now, tuition for the students at IUP is equal to all the major universities across the state. In fact, in the last 10 years, tuition's increased 40%. So the kids are no longer receiving any benefit by coming to a state school. That is the issue, compounded by the fact there's less kids graduating from high school. So what we need to do is get a larger percentage of a smaller group of kids. And to compound this, in 2025, 5 years from now, we're going to hit it's called the enrollment cliff. And that's going to be another hit against these kids. And what happens at IUP, that is the centerpiece of our economy. Whatever happens to them is going to happen to Indiana Borough and our county. And I can't believe that we've reached the point today where IUP is considering laying off 300 people, and my opponent co-signed a bill to right-size IUP. How we ever got to this point, I don't know. There's other solutions. We need to increase the spending to get the tuition rate down to where the school starts looking attractive to more high school students. Get the more students in there that we can. It's going to be good for our economy. We need IUP to support our economy. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Struzzi, you'll have 1 minute to respond. That microphone is not working at all now. So we will have this momentary delay, and as we rewire Mr. Struzzi's microphone, we'll go back. I don't know what you want to do, go back to the original cord or not. I'll remind you that our debate is brought to you this morning by the Indiana County Republican Party and the Indiana County Democratic Party. And I believe that we are now ready to go, Mr. Struzzi, again.
Are we good?
Yes, we're good.
All right. Thank you, Todd. Yeah, clearly, we're all deeply concerned with the state system right now. People need to understand that the PASHE system, the Pennsylvania system of higher education, operates with one checkbook. So when the system is struggling, all universities are bearing that burden. The legislation that we passed gave PASHE the flexibility to make changes. Those changes have been needed for decades. We need to fund the PASHE system more. I've been advocating for that for the past 2 years that I have been in Harrisburg. Part of the problem is we fund Penn State, Pitt, and Temple as well. And it creates an unhealthy competitive system here within Pennsylvania. But the problems aren't specific to IUP. They're demographic challenges that we face across this entire Commonwealth. People are not having as many children. We don't have as many high school graduates. People are leaving Pennsylvania because of the toxic atmosphere that's created by our state government, basically. You know, the governor's excessive taxing and pushing people out of Pennsylvania. We need to change our demographics, but we also need to do what's right for IUP. Thank you.
Mr. Semsick, you'll get the last response on this question.
Well, I understand. You know, I refer to IUP as our local focal point for the state higher system of education. I understand we have to address the entire thing. But if we don't try to help ourselves, and I'm telling you, it's there. We know that the way we were going to generate revenue for these efforts we want to do is we're going to tighten loopholes, cut subsidies. We're going to legalize adult recreational marijuana, and we're going to close the loopholes to stop the corruption in cyber schools, which has been going on for 20 years. And they're siphoning off hundreds of millions of dollars. There's money to be regathered and dispersed into our education system.
Okay, gentlemen, we move on to question number 2. It has to do with the other educational part of our conversation this morning, and that has to do with public school funding. And the question, Mr. Struzzi, will be first for you. You'll have 2 minutes. Is property tax reform or replacement an important issue for you, especially in terms of school funding and the school funding formula?
Well, it is absolutely an important issue to me, Todd. It was one of the major campaign points of the 2018 election, as you know. Property taxes are an incredible burden on our property owners, particularly our senior citizens. We were very close to pushing some property tax reform bills in the House, and then the coronavirus hit, and those got pushed to the back burner. But I am confident that in the next session, we will revisit property tax elimination. Part of the problem is, of course, you have to fund our schools adequately. That's a $14 billion nugget that we have to fill, and basically it becomes a tax shift. Now, there are a number of different pieces of legislation that have been introduced, including House Bill, Senate Bill 76, that basically increases the PIT, the personal income tax, and the sales and use tax. I think those are viable options moving forward, but we also need to look at controlling school spending. Our school districts in Pennsylvania in 2019 spent $30 billion. That's an increase of about $2 billion from the previous year. The charter school issue is real, and it definitely affects our local school districts. I've spoken with all of our local superintendents, and the charter school issue, the funding issue for charter schools, is their number one concern. Basically, our school districts have to pay whatever the amount of charter school tuition is for families that want to go outside of the school district. That includes transportation in cases where that's necessary. So there are some bills in the House right now that I am co-sponsoring to create charter school reform, to basically create a flat level of tuition for charter schools. That would take some of the burden off of our local school districts. And then also, if a school district provides its own charter school, the parents and the families should use that charter school. And if they choose to go outside of the school district, then they would have to pay for that themselves. I believe in school choice, but I do not believe in burdening all of our taxpayers with that increased excessive amount on our school budget. So I think school funding is obviously clearly important. Quality of education is clearly important. As a father of 4 school-age children, I care deeply about our school districts, and I want to make sure that every child has an equal opportunity, no matter where they live or what background they come from. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Semsick, your response.
This is my second top priority issue. And before I get into the plan I support, I want to address Act 76. And that's the bill that they were just talking about. That's the $14 billion bill. I want to make sure people understand this. I'm going to give you a brief example. We researched one individual in Indiana. That person owns 27 properties. They're appraised at $3.2 million. If this bill was passed, this man would receive a reduction every year of $51,000. And he's not even one of the big property owners in Indiana. We have people that own hundreds of properties, and they would receive the same reduction on all hundreds of these properties. And these funds do have to be replaced through some other mechanism. And right now they're talking about the state employment tax going up 70% and broadening the sales tax and increasing it by 1%. That means we're putting the burden of the tax increase back on the working.
That is 1 minute, sir. Okay, your response was 1 minute.
Okay.
Mr. Struzzi, you get the final minute on this question.
Well, I again, as I said in the previous debate, I don't think my opponent clearly understands 76. It is a vehicle towards property tax reform or elimination. There's a reason it didn't pass completely through the General Assembly a couple of years ago. It needs some tweaks, but the commitment is there to work on this. There are a number of bills out there to provide exclusions simply for your homestead, property tax elimination on your primary residence. There are a number of different components to that. The point is, we need to work towards property tax elimination. I'm committed to do that. My colleagues in Harrisburg are committed to do that. But the bottom line, again, is we have to make sure we're adequately funding our school districts. No child should face the fear of not having a quality education or not having the education that they want to have. We need to make sure that we're providing all of those opportunities, including early childhood education, pre-K, because I think that's the foundation for the future for many students who need to learn how to learn. So again, we need to address property taxes, but we also need to make sure we're adequately funding our schools. Thank you.
All right, our next question in our debate, and again, we are brought to you by the Indiana County Democratic Party, the Indiana County Republican Party as well. Mr. Semsick, you'll have 2 minutes on this question. The pandemic has shown the inadequacy of the state's rural broadband system. What will you do as a legislator to fix it?
Well, the broadband is extremely important to Indiana. Now that a lot of the students are online, all of our deficiencies have been heightened, and everyone knows what they are. I don't think we even need to discuss that. It's how we get there. And again, we think we have options, from legalized marijuana to close loopholes, subsidies, cyber school, and yes, we are even going to collect the Marcellus Shale extraction fee. That all goes into the state coffers that could be used for numerous items that we plan to support here. And the broadband could be one of those. And we need to get involved with the technology, the electric companies, all the people that are familiar with this. Bring these people together and let them do their job to get us a complete system at the best price possible. Thank you.
Your response.
Yes, thank you, Todd. Broadband is clearly a huge issue for Indiana County, particularly our rural areas. And when you look at big picture issues like demographics, I think having broadband in all 4 corners of Pennsylvania and every geographical area of Pennsylvania, that will help to bring people back to Pennsylvania. One thing that the COVID pandemic clearly demonstrated is that people need to have the ability to work from home or to be educated from home. We need to make that happen, and we are making that happen. Myself, Senator Pittman, the County Planning Department, and the County Commissioners have been working since I took office diligently to address the broadband issues. We were working with North Central Planning to look at new technology, to look at where we have areas where there are dead zones, and utilizing hotspot technology to provide access to those areas. The commissioners were able to allocate more than $2 million to broadband expansion in the Brush Valley area along 286 and in some other areas. So we are making steps in the right direction. We recently passed some legislation that I co-sponsored to allow rural co-ops like...
1 minute is up.
Okay. Well, we're making progress. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Semsick, you get the last word on this one.
Well, again, and I do want to thank Indiana County Commissioners and the Director of Planning for coming up with that $1.5 million seed money through the Federal CARES Act. And that is a great start. That's the way we get things accomplished. It's very difficult to find the huge chunks of money to do it all at one time. So piecemeal it, get it going, build on your success. We'll get there in the end.
All right, gentlemen, it is time for our next question as this debate moves forward here. We again want to remind our listeners this is the Pennsylvania House 62nd District, and the election is coming up on Tuesday. Our conversation brought to you this morning by the Indiana County Republican Party and by the Indiana County Democratic Party. And Mr. Struzzi, the next question belongs to you. You'll have 2 minutes to respond to this question. Has Pennsylvania's approach to the COVID-19 pandemic been appropriate for businesses?
Specific to businesses, no, it has not, Todd. We initially reacted as a state government, as a General Assembly, as the governor's office together. We passed legislation to provide more than $50 million in protection equipment for our medical providers and first responders. We changed the election code, changed the education code to allow our children to be educated, and a number of other pieces of legislation that were fundamentally important to the COVID response. And then the governor implemented the shutdown and the confusing and sometimes seemingly favoritism-like waiver process for businesses. That he forced our small businesses in downtown Indiana to close while keeping Walmart open. He forced certain contractors to not be able to do work, to provide even kitchens for people whose homes are under construction. That seemed to make no rhyme or reason to the General Assembly. And when we started asking questions about that, we really did not get any answers. And that I think is where things sort of fell apart with communication between the General Assembly and the governor's office. The whole business waiver process made zero sense. And look at the repercussions now. We have businesses in town that are not going to reopen, businesses across Pennsylvania that are leaving Pennsylvania, and we are still talking about a shutdown. We're still forcing restaurants to be at 50%, even though we're getting into colder weather. We all understand the health concerns, but I think we flattened the curve, as was the original intent. Now we need to allow businesses to fully reopen, get people back to work. That's going to solve our budget problem. If people aren't working, they aren't making money, they're not spending money. People have left this Commonwealth and they are not coming back. We know for a fact a number of people left to Ohio and West Virginia for work. And I've heard firsthand that why would I come back to Pennsylvania when their tax structures aren't conducive to business and they aren't open for workers and people to have a family-sustaining wage. And I think we really lost focus during the business waiver process, and that has come out now in subsequent right-to-know requests.
All right, Mr. Semsick, your response.
This is a worldwide pandemic. This is serious stuff. It's huge. If anybody thought they were going to get through this unscathed, they never even started off on the right foot. When they started the non-life sustaining business list and the waiver process, that did create a lot of issues. But the whole idea of that scenario is to restrict movement to try to control the spread of the virus. That's why it was done, and this governor did everything he possibly could to achieve his goals, which were to save lives and slow the spread of the pandemic. And if you take a look at it, in total deaths, Pennsylvania's 13th. We're the 6th largest in population. His efforts have paid off. Has there been mistakes and errors? Yes, but you cannot criticize a person for trying to do their best. Thank you.
Mr. Struzzi, you get the last chance at this question.
Well, my heart goes out to the literally hundreds and maybe thousands of people that have called my office asking for any sort of help they can with unemployment. If you're going to shut the state down, you need to make sure that you have the resources to provide for people. And people simply could not feed their families. They could not pay their bills. And to me, that's unacceptable. Yes, mistakes were made. I understand that this is an unprecedented pandemic that, we've all charted a new course here. But again, You cannot shut down businesses completely and expect people to survive. People live paycheck to paycheck, and when we didn't provide that unemployment compensation, we didn't give them alternatives. Now we have compounded mental health issues. Our drug addiction rates are double, and our overdose deaths are double here in Indiana County. Suicide rates are increasing. I mean, we've created a cure that was worse than the disease, and now it's time to stop and fix that. And it continues, and to me, I don't understand why, because our hospitalizations have not increased. Yes, we're seeing more positive numbers, but we're moving in the right direction. Thank you.
All right, our next question, and I believe we're up to you, Mr. Semsick, with the very first. Dennis Semsick is our Democratic candidate for the House 62nd. Jim Struzzi is our Republican candidate for House 62. We want to continue talking about the pandemic. We just talked about the effect of the pandemic and the state's response for businesses. Let's turn it to another of the aspects of the pandemic response, and that is from a health standpoint. Has Pennsylvania done a good job?
Well, I believe our governor did what he had to do. His goal, again, was to save lives and slow down the transition. He decided to surround himself by a panel of experts and specialists so he could get the feedback from them that he needed to make these adjustments. This pandemic is extremely fluid. It's constantly changing. And when we started this thing, nobody knew anything about this pandemic. And yet he was forced to make decisions early to get moving. In fact, he was ahead of the pack. There were other states out there that adopted some of his principles in their state. And there's nothing happening in Pennsylvania that is not happening across America. It's all the same, but we're better off than most of them. Now he had to go out into the market the same as every other governor, every mayor of a major city and other countries, and had to find where to get the PPE supplies and testing kits. That was a major chore, and it's still, they were fighting with that thing to get this, the materials that we need for even our long-term nursing homes. We got to take care of those people, and we've never fully got that under control yet. But the big thing is we got to end this virus, and we're not doing anything to help ourselves to do that because we're using too many half measures. We're trying to open the economy too early, and we're not wearing face masks. I'd like to plead with the people, please wear face masks for the rest of the year. If that's what it takes, do it. Convince your family, convince your friends. The face mask is our solution to end this pandemic and stop all these other impacts that are going on. And what we need to do is eliminate the need for future restrictions. Thank you.
Mr. Struzzi, your response.
Thank you, Todd. As I said in the previous question, we all worked together, we all did what we were supposed to, we all stayed home, and we successfully flattened the curve. Here we are 7-8 months later, and we're still faced with the same burdens, even though the pandemic is not the same as it was, when it initially started. We understand it more. Restaurants understand it more. Businesses understand it more. People understand it more. School districts understand it more. Families understand it more. We're doing the right things. But the problem is, again, as I said, the cure has become worse than the disease. $3.5 to $4 billion deficit in the state budget. How are we going to make up for that? That's what I'm working on right now. That's what I'm focusing on right now through the Appropriations Committee, is how do we fill that budget gap so we can provide the resources people need, so we can provide the resources that the State Department of Human Services needs, the State Department of Aging, the State Department of Health, our nursing homes, our first responders. Okay. We have to do the right things.
Very good. Mr. Semsick, you get the last response on this question. Anything else you'd like to say?
Economy. That's all we hear about this pandemic, economy. I'm concerned about, and supposedly we understand more about it now. I don't think so. One of the last bills they just passed to the governor that he vetoed was that they wanted to increase the number of people in the restaurants and open the bars to let people sit at the bars and drink as we go into the winter season. I can't imagine anything that was more irresponsible than to do something like that. We do not want to put people in a confined area where the air doesn't circulate. We're already in a resurgence. Right now, and they still wanted to do that. That is risky at its worst. Thank you.
Okay, we move on to our next question. Our race for the Pennsylvania State House of Representatives, 62nd District. Mr. Struzzi, you will get the next question. Is the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative good policy, and should Pennsylvania join it?
Thanks, Todd. That's an important subject, but I do want to jump back real quick. I find it offensive that someone who collects a retirement check and doesn't have to worry about going to work can demean the importance of our economy. I don't think you understand what it's like for families who have had to endure these excessive restrictions, and I do because I've been dealing with it every day for the past 8 months. Again, overburdening restrictions, the Greenhouse Gas Initiative that will effectively destroy our energy industry here in Pennsylvania. It makes zero sense to me. The numbers don't bear out. Climate change and the impacts of global warming are important and need to be addressed, but the Greenhouse Gas Initiative, the carbon tax, is not the way to do it. It will destroy our economy here in Indiana County and in most of Pennsylvania. Your electric bills will increase. We know for a fact that our power plants are going to shut down. A lot of people say, well, coal is on its way out anyway. I don't believe that, and I certainly don't think we need to kick them out the door. We know for a fact, again, that capital investment has occurred in the energy industry in Ohio and West Virginia rather than in Pennsylvania because of the constant threat of the Marcellus Shale tax that my opponent supports, the carbon tax that the governor is continuing to try to push here. There's a reason the Boilermakers have endorsed me, because they know that I am fighting for their jobs and their livelihoods, and we simply cannot replace those jobs. I am extremely concerned for the future of our small towns, our communities, and particularly Indiana County, because we have two of the largest coal-fired electric generation plants in Pennsylvania. And yet the administration continues to move forward with this RGGI implementation, even in the midst of a pandemic where you can't have public meetings for us to voice our concerns. We have asked the DEP to come to Indiana County and look these men and women in the eye and tell them, we're taking your jobs, we're taking your livelihood, we're taking your tax base, and they won't do it. And to me, that's just fundamentally wrong, and I'm going to stand up for our families here in Indiana County until my last breath.
Okay, Mr. Semsick, the question having to do with the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative.
Yeah, I just want to clear up some terminology first. The carbon tax. I love that phrase, What it is, it's a penalty placed on the plant owners for air pollution. That's what it is. I see this thing as our legislature 10 years ago failed us as a society. They knew about the situation with these power plants because they exceeded their lifespan back before that. We should have had an exit plan developed. We should know what we need to get from full production to full closure. What's those impacts? How do we get there? That was never done. My issue right now, what I think we need to do, we need to bring people together and find solutions through technology to extend the life of these plants a little bit longer. But the big thing is the recycle value of these sites, when they do close, and they will before long, is valuable for when we start retooling for green energy.
All right, Mr. Struzzi, last response on this question.
Well, I think the main point that they miss is the fact that our power plants have already reduced emission levels below what the governor had asked for, what the Clean Power Plan had required. They are already at lower levels. Why do we continue to punish an industry that's on the resurge? Why do we want to push energy out of Pennsylvania when it is one of our greatest resources to build our economy? I cannot fathom why we are not doing more to incentivize natural gas, manufacturing, energy production. We provide energy to the East Coast. It doesn't go west, it goes east. And Ohio and West Virginia know that. They would love to see us enter into RGGI, because then we will be buying our electrical generation from Ohio and West Virginia, and they know that. I don't understand why the DEP, why the governor wants to continue to move forward with this. I passed House Bill 2025 basically saying, look at all the impacts, which they are not doing. They are not looking at the economic impacts, the detrimental negative impacts of RGGI on Indiana County and Pennsylvania.
All right. We move on to our next question. It's for Mr. Semsick. This comes from one of our listeners this morning. During the last presidential debate, former Vice President Biden indicated that he would take away incentives from the oil industry and that our country needs to phase out of oil dependency, at one time saying he would ban fracking, and since changing those comments to say that he would not. Which do you believe is true, and what is the impact on Indiana County?
I believe that the vice president did say that at one time, but I think there's a definite change in his position, and I support that. Fracking is here. Fracking is critical for us to maintain the natural gas and do it economically. And we still need natural gas, and we do have to promote that. And that could be part of the solution for the transition in the power plants. So, yeah, fracking's here. I think fracking's here to stay, and it should be. So that's basically what I have to say about that subject.
All right, Mr. Struzzi.
Well, I think we can agree on one thing then. Obviously, the energy industry is fundamental to Pennsylvania's economy. I am fully supportive of growing our energy industry, inviting those resources back to Pennsylvania, those capital investments. Companies want to be here. They do. They want to work here. And when it comes to fracking and anything that has to do with drilling or the natural gas industry, these companies want to do it right. They don't want to get penalized. They don't want to create a bad name for themselves. I know this firsthand from working with them. They want to do it the right way because they don't want the headaches or the headlines. But the bottom line is the DEP and the governor continue to push those investments out of Pennsylvania. And to me, it doesn't make any sense, particularly in light of a $3.5 billion shortfall in our budget revenues. We need to be growing our economy. We need to be growing our jobs. And when you have one of the world's greatest supplies of natural gas beneath your feet, you need to get out of the way and let that happen.
All right, Mr. Semsick, anything else you'd like to say on that question?
Well, no.
Okay, very good. We'll move to our next one. Mr. Struzzi, you will get the first response on this question. Is there a proper constitutional balance of powers between the branches of government in Pennsylvania? And if you do not believe there is, what should be done to restore it?
Well, thank you, Todd. I think, we've seen some strange things happen over the past few months with the executive branch and the legislative branch sort of at odds at how the Constitution is actually read, and we've had certain legal opinions on that. Many believe that the governor has, in fact, exceeded his powers during this pandemic. Thus the reason for the numerous pieces of legislation that we've tried to pass, because that is the power that we have. As legislators, that's what we do. We create legislation and we vote on legislation. And it seems in some cases that did, in fact, influence the governor's decisions to allow some things to reopen. We tried to pass the declaration to end the disaster, the resolution to end the disaster declaration, and that failed. But again, we did, though, successfully pass a resolution that will allow a constitutional amendment. It'll be voted on in the next, voted on this section, voted on in the next session to be on the ballot, hopefully in the primary next year, to change the power of the executive branch in a disaster so that after, I believe it's 3 weeks, it will require a vote by the General Assembly to extend that disaster declaration. So that still gives the governor time to react, time to mobilize, for a 3-week period when there is a disaster. And let's face it, the disaster declarations aren't meant for something like a pandemic. They are meant for flooding or things like that, natural disasters. And the governor has continued to extend this declaration, much to the detriment of Pennsylvania. And I think that's part of the reason that we needed to have those checks and balances. And unfortunately, somehow or other, the Constitution is subject to interpretation depending on your legal scholars. And we've been battling that in Harrisburg for some time now, ever since we've gone down this path of just excessive restrictions on people's lives to the point that many think are unnecessary.
Mr. Semsick, the question on the constitutional balance, and does our Constitution need fixed?
Interpretation, and Jim was exactly right there. The interpretation is in the eye of the beholder. If it was that clear, they would not still be dealing with this issue. I believe the Constitution's fine. Our opposition party is trying to strip the governor of his powers, but that's nothing more than a power grab. The other issue they're concerned about is the length of an emergency. I mean, thank God this legislature wasn't in power during World War II when those emergency powers lasted for years. It's hard to put a limit on an emergency. Again, this pandemic is a worldwide crisis, never approached before. Instead of fighting it, wouldn't it be great to hear someone say, Governor, what can we do to help you? But that olive branch was never extended.
Okay. Mr. Struzzi, you get the last response on this question, should you care to make one.
I'm not sure what media outlet my opponent listens to, but that olive branch was extended many, many times. The governor refused to listen to the legislature, which I remind people is the voice of Pennsylvania residents. You know, it was not a power grab. It was a effort to try and reopen Pennsylvania for the people who are struggling through these hard times. It was us expressing the voice of our constituents. That is why we were passing those bills, because people were asking us to. Hundreds and hundreds of people begging us to let them go back to work, to let them resume a normal life. Yes, do your CDC guidelines, use your protective equipment and all that kind of stuff, but let us go back to making a living and feeding our families. That's why we passed those bills. That's why we tried to push the governor, who refused to even speak with our leadership. He says one thing, but the truth is another. He governs by press conference, we govern by action.
All right, our next question goes to Mr. Semsick first, and it is something that you have already expressed a couple of times this morning, and you'll have 2 minutes on this. Governor Wolf and Democratic Party leaders are pushing the legislature to approve recreational marijuana use for the tax revenue that it would raise should Pennsylvania legalize recreational marijuana.
Yeah, I believe we should legalize recreational marijuana for a number of reasons. First one, the majority of the Pennsylvanians support it. They want to see it. We need the jobs. We need the revenue from it. And there's a lot of benefits to be gained here. Now, a lot of people are concerned, what's that going to do to addictions, or the addiction problem we have? Marijuana is used in the treating of addictions. It's all in how things are regulated. Just because it's marijuana does not make it bad, as long as it's controlled. There's a number of states around us that are already doing this. They went through the learning curve. They learned what those problems are. They learned how to deal with them. We're not going to reinvent the wheel. We have to learn, take the best practices, move forward, and take advantage of the opportunities there for you. As far as someone walking down the street smoking a joint, we have alcohol in our society, but you don't see people with alcohol out on the street, and I'm sure the same thing will happen there. Everything can be regulated. We can use this to our benefit, and God knows we need that money in our coffers. Thank you.
Mr. Struzzi.
Thank you, Todd. First of all, recreational marijuana is not the same as medical marijuana. Recreational marijuana has a hallucinogenic effect. Medical marijuana does not. It is a completely different subject. We have so many problems still with medical marijuana itself. We have to address those problems before we even begin to consider recreational marijuana. And I remind my opponent that it is still a federally regulated drug. It is not legal in the United States of America, recreational marijuana. So that creates a whole nother list of problems. And you talk about addiction, domestic violence, driving under the influence, the fact that we can't fill the many jobs that we have now because people can't pass a drug test. There are just too many unanswered questions to be putting a subject like recreational marijuana out there right now, and we don't really know what kind of tax revenue that would even generate. The governor likes to model things in his favor, but I disagree.
Mr. Semsick, you get the last response on this question.
Yeah, I excuse me 1 minute.
All right, this is coming off your time here.
I get a kick out of all these reasons why we can't do anything. I mean, it's just my nature. No is not in my vocabulary. And my cup's always half full. If I'm going to fail at something, I'm going to fail at it trying to accomplish it. I will never give up the battle before I even start. There's a lot to be gained here. There's a lot of issues, but that is what it's all about. You get in there, you roll up your sleeves, you attack the problem, find out what the issues are, and solve them. Don't run away from them because they're there. This is called life. This is the way we accomplish things. Thank you.
All right, our next question, and by the way, you are listening this morning to our candidates debate for the House 62nd District. Jim Struzzi, Dennis Semsick are two candidates. The election coming up on Tuesday. The next question, Mr. Struzzi, belongs to you first, and the question has to do with the Pennsylvania business climate. Is Pennsylvania a business-friendly state?
Absolutely not. Unfortunately, we really need to look at regulation reform. We need to look at our tax structures. You ask anyone in business who operates on a national scale, and they will tell you that Pennsylvania might as well put up a sign that says, "Don't come here if you want to run a business." Our tax codes punish businesses. Our regulations are excessive. We need to change that, and we are in the process of making those changes. That is one of the priorities in the next session, is to look at how we can make Pennsylvania more conducive. Making Pennsylvania open for business creates more jobs. It will create a larger tax base. It will make life better for all of us. We need to open our doors. We need to lower our corporate net income tax rate. That is another big flag that says go somewhere else, because we're going to tax you so that you can't operate effectively here in Pennsylvania. I mean, we've seen that happen with the federal tax changes that occurred a couple of years ago. You go to any business that operates on a large scale, and they will tell you that they hired more people, that they trained more people, that they gave raises to more people. And in Pennsylvania, we don't think that way for some reason. You talk to the Pennsylvania Chamber, and they will tell you the same thing. Any organization that knows how to grow a business, knows how to create jobs, knows how to create family-sustaining wages will tell you that Pennsylvania needs to change its tax structures, needs to get rid of some of the regulations that stifle business growth and even entrepreneurship, and we need to open those doors to let all industries know that Pennsylvania is the place that you want to do business. We have the natural resources here. We have the work base. Western Pennsylvania for decades and decades and decades was known for its work ethic, and yet we continue to push business aside. I think that needs to change, and that is one of my focus areas in the next session, is to make sure that we open PA back up for business, and we bring people back to Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Mr. Semsick, on the question of business.
Well, I definitely don't see it that way. For me, Pennsylvania is a huge state, a lot of people, a lot of natural resources. Everything's here, and these businesses know that. They want it. They're going to come here, and they're going to do business the way it should be done, and we're going to regulate and protect our environment. I think we're just about a year away. Once we get this pandemic under control, we're about a year away from seeing a great acceleration of business in Indiana County. I see a great future for Indiana County. I think it's going to be super down the road through high-tech type expansion. And that's going to come. It's going to come. We've already started to see a start of it with Harbor Freight and the Wyotech complex down there. And we're going to see more of that in the future.
Mr. Struzzi, last chance at this question.
Thank you, Todd. You have to get out and live in the real world and talk to these businesses. This is firsthand information. This isn't hypothetical. Businesses say this. Large businesses are locating elsewhere because Pennsylvania is too restrictive, too overtaxed. Yes, the future is bright because of the hard work that we have done. When I was with the Chamber, with the Planning Department, with all of our efforts as an economic development team through the Indiana County Center for Economic Operations, there is good news on the horizon, but it's because of the hard work that we've been doing for the past decade. We laid the foundation for this to happen. But part of the reason it's happening is because we are giving them tax breaks in the Keystone Opportunity Zones. We shouldn't have to do that. They should want to come here on their own, and we need to make that culture change. We need to shift it so that businesses want to locate not just in Indiana County, but in all of Pennsylvania, because we are the greatest state in this nation. Thank you.
All right, we continue our candidates debate. We'll have one more question before we give you the chance to revisit any topic that you would like that has been discussed so far this morning. Mr. Semsick, you get the first chance at this question. When you are sworn in to office in January and the new session begins, what are the top priorities for you?
Well, the first thing for me, and it's a must, we've got to get control of this virus. We've got to get it to where we can assure our people that it's safe for them to get out in this economy and start spending their money. When that happens, that's the beginning for everything else. The next thing is to pass this fair school real estate tax reform. And I support a version of the homestead where the people that live in a house and you own it, you'll never pay taxes on that property again. The farmers, your homestead, it will be exempt. And any farmland, active farmland that you buy, I don't care when, it will be exempt. And for small businesses, if you own a small business and you own that real estate, you'll be exempt. And what's nice about this plan, it's only about $7 billion, not 14, and it's a much more manageable number, and it gives us options to replace that revenue. And finally, the last thing that I would really attack is funding for all education, specifically the higher education. I want to go back and restore those universities. I don't want to give up and right size. We're losing when we do that. And everything we spend in education will help our economy. We get IUPs stabilized, we're going to stabilize Indiana's economy. And we need that in the borough. The borough needs all the help they can, and that's our small businesses. Thank you.
Mr. Struzzi, your priorities.
Well, the list is long, Todd. Clearly, we have to make sure that we are protecting our local jobs, our local economy, growing our statewide economy, our tax base. I'm very concerned with our census numbers to see where we are demographically, not just here in Indiana County, but in all of Pennsylvania. We're seeing people migrate to other states, and that has to stop. We need to prioritize our spending at a statewide level. I agree that IUP needs to be a priority, just not IUP, but the entire state system. They have been underfunded for many years, and I have been advocating in my role on the Appropriations Committee to increase funding for the state system so that they can offset those tuition costs. I mean, they were built to be a low-cost school option for students, and that unfortunately has dwindled over the years. I think we need to look at our local infrastructure. I was appointed to the Penn Vest Board. We need to make sure that we have clean water, good water for all of our communities, good sewage systems, good infrastructure, and of course the broadband issue is not going to go away until we fix it. Right. Thank you.
Mr. Semsick, last chance at this question. Anything else on your priorities?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to put more money into people's pockets, and through our revenue methods that we will increase revenue, we're going to do that. Even through the tax reform, I want to put that money back in their pockets. These people need relief right now. We need to get this money to them to help them as much as we possibly can. And that's one of my focal points.
All right, gentlemen, we have reached the point in our debate where we are winding down. Your final statements will be coming up in a few moments, but I want to give you each 2 minutes, 2 minutes for each of you, to revisit any of the topics that have been discussed this morning and to make whatever point you would like to make. So 2 minutes, Mr. Struzzi, you'll get the first chance, and then Mr. Semsick will have 2 minutes as well.
Well, thank you, Todd. I think that the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, DEP is going to publish that in the bulletin, the PA bulletin here on November 7th. That gives about 60 days for public comment. I encourage everyone who cares about our energy industry, who cares about our local communities, who cares about our local school districts that are going to lose millions of dollars in taxes if our power plants close and our coal and energy industries leave this area, to reach out to the DEP and express your concerns. Tell the governor how you feel, because this is a huge issue facing us right now. And if it moves forward, I fear the worst for our Indiana County communities. But that said, we do need to have a vision for the future, and I am working on that vision. We need to capitalize on what we have here in Pennsylvania, what we have here in Indiana County. We are a safe community. We're a community where people want to live. We need to understand, what it's going to take to bring them back. And I think it is the rural broadband access. I think it is good paying jobs. And it's obviously good education. We need to have the infrastructure to grow businesses here. The Wyotech announcement just a couple of weeks ago is huge for Indiana County. And it also has a manufacturing component. And part of that manufacturing component is going to capitalize on the Shell cracker plant in Beaver County. Those resources are here in Indiana County, and we need to make sure that we, as far as the legislature in Pennsylvania, are doing everything we can to open the doors to business. When people have good paying jobs, they're happy. They're providing for their families. People don't want handouts. We need to reduce taxes. We need to grow our economy, and we need to make sure that people have a future right here in Indiana County and in Pennsylvania. But we can't just do that haphazardly. We need to make sure that we are bringing business back to Pennsylvania, conducting regulatory reform to allow the businesses that are here to grow and make sure that people have the resources they need to recover emotionally, physically, and financially from this pandemic. Thank you.
Mr. Semsick, 2 minutes on any topic that we have discussed during this past hour together.
Well, I want to go back about the setting the climate in Indiana to where for future growth. 35 years ago, I attended a meeting in Harrisburg when I was still at PennDOT, and we had an initiative at that point. We wanted to upgrade Route 22 across the state because for safety mainly. But at that time, the decision was made at a state level to build 22 to support economic growth, and we did that. And during those years, we also successfully secured $125 million to allow us to rebuild 119 South from Homer City to Route 22, which provided 4-lane access to the county seat. We also made sure that road was capable of supporting economic growth. So right now, the table's set. It's all there. And there's been development down in southern Indiana County ever since that highway network was upgraded. And I'm glad to see that. That reaffirms our efforts back 35 years ago we did this. So that, and now we see like the YO Tech is coming in, and they're coming in mainly because of that highway access, which is great. And that's the kind of access or development we're going to get. But what I want to state here, the new jobs we get in Indiana County will not be energy related like they are today. And I want to say that for a reason. We're giving a lot of subsidies at the state level to these gas companies. And for that reason, there is no money left for us to help the things we want to do, like to salvage IUP. There's no money left for that. So we got to look ahead and find ways to move these issues forward. We don't want to wait for these. We'll go get these jobs ourselves. Thank you.
All right, the time is up, and we are running rapidly toward the end of our time together. Our conversation on the 62nd House District. 2 minutes each for your closing statements. Mr. Semsick, you drew the first one.
Okay, I see a bright future for Indiana. I mean, there's a lot of potential here for us to do great things. The table is set. The roadway system's there. Our county commissioners and the directors of the Planning Commission, they had the foresight back 30 years ago when they started building these industrial parks to accept these businesses, which is really great. Again, we get IUP stabilized and focus in on them. And then other business, I call them satellite businesses, will start to move in around them. Our funding sources we're going to use for all this stuff we want to do is legalize marijuana, close the loopholes, subsidies, stop the corruption in cyber schools and the Marcellus Shale. If we take that and put it in a pot and use that to try to fix the things we want to fix, there's a lot we can do. Minimum wage. We need to get minimum wage. I can't think of any one thing more important than minimum wage. But I want to ask, for me, the words like Republican, Democrat, Independent, those are divisive terms. I don't even like to use them. Over my career, I've been able to bring people together to build consensus. And I've done that just through my personality and showing these people I really care. So what I'm doing now, I'm not going to ask you to vote for a Democrat. On November 3rd, I'm going to ask you to vote for Dennis Semsick as a member of a coalition of concerned citizens for Indiana County. Put me in Harrisburg. Let me bring my talents down here with these aggressive ideas to help our people build a brighter future. Thank you. God bless and protect all of you.
Mr. Struzzi, your final statement this morning.
Thank you, Todd. You know, when I ran for office, I vowed to fight for our rights, our constitutional rights, our Second Amendment rights, pro-life, fight for our medical community, fight for our firefighters, fight to grow jobs, fight to protect our families, fight to protect Indiana County. I have a passion for this community, for this county, for all the communities I represent, and I care deeply. You know, I want to see my children have an opportunity here. And I have worked hard these past 2 years to deliver on those promises. I have opened my door to anyone who has an issue. My staff and I work very hard to help everyone who comes through that door. And we don't care where you come from, what your background is, what your political affiliation is. If you have a problem, we're here to help you, and we have done that. As I said earlier, we've helped more than 4,000 constituents in this past 2 years. I have personally co-sponsored or authored more than 480 pieces of legislation right now, both bipartisan and working across the aisle because I think they're good for Pennsylvania or they're good for Indiana County. It takes that kind of willingness and that effort to do what's right, regardless of where you come from or you know what your political views are. And I have done that over and over again through my time in the legislature. And I'm committed to helping people, committed to helping Indiana County, committing to fight for our values, fight for our communities, fight for our families. And I would ask that I hope I have earned your vote for re-election. I have truly worked hard, truly tried to understand the issues, trying to understand the complexities. I disagree with my opponent on many things, particularly recreational marijuana. The time is not right for that. I disagree that we need to create more taxes. Why would you create more taxes at a time when people are overtaxed? That is not moving forward in the right direction for Pennsylvania. But again, I'm a man of God, and I ask God for guidance every day, and I'm going to fight for your families and for Indiana County.
All right, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our debate today brought to you by the Indiana County Democratic Party and Republican Party. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
101.
The Indiana County Republican Committee is proud to be a presenting sponsor of today's debate, and we thank Renda Broadcasting for hosting it, as we have always supported getting factual information out to our community. Our committee would like to thank each of you for listening in, as it is very important for votes to be made with knowledge and confidence. Let's work together and keep Indiana, Pennsylvania, and America great by voting all Republican on November 3rd.
Panel after the election. Dave.
Oh, Jared, the coronavirus has resurged from Europe to here in the U.S., where cases are rising in all but 3 states and deaths are increasing.